Aloha mai kako. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kevin John Fong, and I am your host today. Welcome to the 2020 Health Equity Advocacy Series. Today's topic is fierce civility. We are so glad you're here. What better time can we talk about in terms of needing fierce civility than this time right now? I'm very happy you're here. Please continue to join by chat and your name and where you're zooming in from and a little bit of a greeting. We can that we are welcomed well. A little bit about the Health Equity Advocacy cohort, if this is new to you. We are funded by the Colorado Trust, so many to them for their support. The HEA cohort, or the cohort as we call ourselves, been in existence for 5 or 6 years now. We are comprised of 18 different nonprofit organizations in Colorado throughout 5 counties. So it's Denver, Metro Shore, and then 5 rural counties throughout Colorado. We comprise different types of organizations, from those who focus on organizing and advocacy to those who focus on statewide policy, and those who focus on direct services. And so it's been a wonderful mix of different organizations together to work for this vision. And this diverse Colorado leaders united by common views and empowered communities dismantle structural and racial inequities and build equitable systems so that all Coloradans can achieve their highest possible. I've had the honor, Michelle as well, with the cohort for about 3 or 4 years. And 2 things that I want to bring up that has really set this group apart. One is how they define health. So it goes beyond just primary health and mental health, but it looks at access to affordable housing, food security, employment, transportation, childcare. It really cast a wide net on what we look at in terms of health. The other thing that they did very early on was to place racial equity at the center. And in some places of Colorado, they're not very racially diverse. And so conversation to say, we know that race is important perhaps, but perhaps not so important in my community, was not as racially diverse. They took that on and really put forth that issue of, people who identify as Black or brown, or people who identify as disabled, or people who identify as trans or queer, if they're not experiencing the highest possible level of health, then for sure, none of us are. And so really putting notion in the center and building everything around that. Thank our sponsors, the Colorado Trust and Colorado Health Foundation, who are provided generous funding for this summit series. We appreciate that. And we've asked of the participants to please respond to our post-summit survey. Dana's going to drop that in the chat box, but we'll also send you an email the next day or so with that, along with the slide decks and some resources that you can continue with. This summit is being recorded, and we will send you that recording probably in the next week or 2 once we get that edited and ready to go. And with that, I want to bring up our featured artist, Tanea Winder. Tanea is an author, singer, songwriter, poet, motivational speaker, and educator who comes from intertribal lineage, Southern Ute, Pyramid Lake Paiute, and Duckwater Shoshone Nation, where she's an enrolled citizen. Her heritage also includes African American and Diné. Tanea's performances and talks emphasize the importance of hard work, the life path one is meant to follow by using their gifts and passions. She blends storytelling, singing, and spoken word to teach about different expressions of love. Tanea is the director of the University of Colorado Boulder's Upward Bound program. During her 10 years there, she has served hundreds of Indigenous youth. Tanea believes she's been placed on this earth to share. Her specialties include youth and women empowerment, healing trauma through art, creative writing workshops, and mental health advocacy. Can you please join me in welcoming Tanea Winder?
Hi, everybody. I'm going to try to go live with my guitar. So if it is shoddy, then I'll just transition to poetry. But I'm really excited to share space with you all today. And I'm just going to open with a song. This song has a phrase in the Ute language called Tuteveak. It means it's a good day. And I'm trying to use poetry, I'm trying to use music to just try to help me reconnect with some of my languages and to help me learn. So this is that, and it's called It's a Good Day. Woke up this morning to greet the day. Lit my sage to give thanks and began to pray. Hey, I ask Creator, do what you can to guide my path. That's all I ask. Tavayak, it's a good day. Yeah, to Tavayak. Ancestors, please protect my spirit, those I hold dearest in my heart. If there are wounds, help me heal them, so others know love even for a minute. To it's a good day. Yeah, to I like opening with that one because to me, I think each day should start with a prayer, with an offering. And when I wrote that song, it kind of came to me like that, like in the form of a prayer. Like if I want to start a good day, what is that? And it's kind of cold in my apartment too, so my hands. But so before I like do another song, I wanted to just tell you guys a quick story. And it comes from my mother's homeland in Nixon, Nevada, the Pyramid Lake Paiute Reservation. And it's the story of the Stone Mother. So if you want to look later, like Google Pyramid Lake or the Stone Mother, you can see the visual. I'm just not sharing it because my Wi-Fi. But the story that the way my uncle has told it, the very like Cliff's Note version of the story is that the original man and the original woman had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. When they were little, they got along really well, but just as human beings do, the older they got, the more they argued and, fought. And they said, if you guys keep arguing, we're going to separate you. So sure enough, again, as humans are, they had conflict, and so they separated them. They sent 2 of them to the north and 2 of them to the south, and they said, when you get there, make sure you light your fire so that we know you're okay. So days passed, and they see a fire lit in one direction, but they never see a fire lit in the other direction. And so the mother, so saddened by their loss, she cried so many tears, she created an entire lake made out of those tears in the middle of the desert. And she turned to stone, to tufa rock, and she still sits there waiting for her children to return. And for me, that story just holds so many different lessons that I apply to my life constantly. When I was younger, just impacted by a lot of loss and trauma, I too felt that I was made of stone. I felt desensitized. I felt that, thank you, Kevin. I felt that, I couldn't cry when you're supposed to. I couldn't feel when you were supposed to. And then as I got older, I realized, wow, like this mother made the greatest sacrifice for us and for our people. She created this entire lake made out of tears so that we could learn how to swim in it, so that we could learn how to navigate our pain. And if you're too tired, like you don't give up, you learn how to tread water, you learn how to float on your back. And then the other meaning of that, just as an Indigenous person, I try to balance, humility, but also being proud of the things I've done and accomplished, because I'm a role model. Like I see myself as a leader for other youth and people to look up to. And so when I try to think about how do I make sure I'm being humble but still honoring these gifts, I think about that story, because she said, light your fire so we know that you're okay. And our ancestors, and all of us have them, regardless of our background, we all have ancestors. I believe all of our ancestors want us to light our fire during our time on this earth so that they know that we're okay. And lighting your fire and figuring out what your passion is, what your heart work is, it's complicated and it can be a lifelong journey, but I just want to encourage all of you out there listening to make sure that you find what your fire is and that you light it here during your time on this earth. So the next song I'm going to perform, it's called She Was the Rain. It's one of the first songs I wrote when I first got this guitar. And it's about, I mean, you'll hear the lyrics, but it's about just, I feel like as an Indigenous woman, as women, or just as people, a lot is put on us to try to help find these solutions, help like find the answers to these problems. And then when you do what you're asked, people almost like expect you to be able to wash everything away or to be able to fix everything. So this song is for those of you who carry that weight and carry that burden, and just know that I see you and we see you. She was born in the rain, grew up to become a storm. They asked for a sound to heal their pain clouds, rinse it away like she was, like she was, like she was the rain. She was the rain. She was the rain. She was the rain. They called out her name, begged her for thunder and a flood. Everyone expects her to wash away all their fear and shame, like she was, like she was, like she was the rain. She was the rain. She was the rain. She was the rain. They begged her for flight, then blamed her for every lightning strike. And they watched her falling as they were calling, please hear my heart. In a world dead set on burning, how could they expect her to stay? Like she could, like she would, like she was the rain. Thank you guys for the comments. I really appreciate it. I lost my grandmother just a few days ago, and I'm still struggling with it and thinking of it. But I always remember like one of the stories my grandma told me from surviving boarding school. She never talked about anything sad. She just said her favorite memory was winning this talent show contest, singing Blue Moon. And I always just think like I'm so grateful for my path, and every time I get to perform and speak and travel, I really feel like I'm living, my grandmother's dreams. And I remember when I first got my guitar, I was playing and I said, I wonder how I got music. Like, I wonder how I got song. And she said, you got it from me. So I always feel like I'm just honoring her every time I get to do this. But this next song I'm going to sing is actually the first song I wrote on guitar. I actually wrote it when I was, just fully getting sober and just thinking about all the times that, I feel like if I had blacked out in my life or just done different things, and like, where did my spirit go during those times? And they say, if you're feeling lost, if you don't feel connected to your spirit, you can always, say your name out loud 4 times, call your spirit back to you. And so this song is for anybody who just needs that return. It's called Come Back to Me. I'm trying to find my place in this world, but it's hard to heal with so much hurt. I feel the weight of each wound, cries the tears that fall, try to hide my light. When you hear the darkness and it's coming for your heart, call sacred medicines you've carried from the start. Come back to me, come back to me, come back to me. My eyes were blinded by unhealthiness, anything to feel this emptiness. I've stumbled and I've fallen over misplaced dreams, wanting a taste of something just to feel anything. When you feel the pain of trauma eating you away, call on your ancestors to return your strength. Come back to me. Come back to me. Come back to me. Come back to me. You get to find the pieces you thought you ever lost. Reach deep inside to call back your heart. And that's just to remind us all that you always have the ability to heal yourself, to call yourself back to yourself, and to find that healing. Just to close out, I have 2 minutes. I'm just going to do one song, a happy song, just to remind us all how important it is to love and be thankful for that love and thank other people for that love. I wrote this for my fiance. I'm really grateful for him, and it's called Thanks for Loving Me. So thank you for loving all the people you love, because the world needs so much more of that. You told me I was brave, even when I felt afraid. You told me to stand tall, get back up when I fall. And I just wanted to say to you, thanks for loving me too. Thanks for loving me. Thanks for loving me. Thanks for loving me too. I never thought I'd find the one I'd want for life, someone with wounds that matched mine. I never known a feeling quite this strong. Finally found where I belong. And I just wanted to say to you, thanks for loving Thanks for loving me. Thanks for loving me. Thanks for loving me too. And I love you more each breath I take. This heart beats for you. And I'll find you in every lifetime. I know this to be true. And I wanted to say to you, thanks for loving me too. Thanks for loving me. Thanks for loving me. Thanks for loving me too. Thank you guys, but I hope you continue to find healing, to find that radical love, that radical responsibility and transparency. And thank you for letting me share some of my gifts, and I'm going to hand it back to Kevin, but thank you all so much. I'll put my website in the link. I'm dropping my first album soon, and I'm going to be naming it for my grandma, so thank you.
Mahalo nui loa. Thank you, Tanaya. Please give it up, Tanaya Winder. Just put much love and appreciation into the chat. That would be very, very much appreciated. And also, yeah, Tanaya, please put your information in there, because I know we all want to stay in touch with you and get help once it gets dropped. So much appreciated to you. You know, we start out with artists each summit, because imagine what time would be like if we didn't have our artists. I mean, you're all streaming whatever it is, the Netflix and the Hulu's and the everything else, you know, and that's kept us going, that's kept us inspired, that's kept us entertained, that has helped us to perhaps escape for just a moment the ills of what's going on. And our local artists, such as Tanea and others that we have featured here, they have such huge gifts, and they don't have that platform anymore to be able to bring their gifts forward. And so I encourage you to, as you think about incorporating the arts in your life as we continue through this time together and go into the dark season of winter, to search out folks like Tanea, or folks like Bobby Lefebvre, folks like Michelle Otero, etc., Don Howard, who's on the call, and turn to them for our hope and inspiration as well. Thank you, Tanea. I want to bring up our wonderful guests, and they are actually guests and friends to those of us in Colorado. And so without ado, I'm going to move forward with, because I want to bring them up quickly. Joe Weston. Joe is an international workshop facilitator, author, consultant, coach, and advocate for lasting peace. He's the author of the book, Mastering Respect Confrontation, founder of the Weston Network, and executive director of the Fierce Civility Project. Joe is currently adjunct professor at Georgetown University, teaching a course called Body-Based Skill Building for Navigating Stress and Confrontation. Joe has spent years studying martial arts, mindfulness, and a variety of traditions to develop a unique approach that combines somatic exercises. He brings a wealth of insight to his work based on many teachings, including Tai Chi Chuan, neuroscience, and his experience in theater. Joe works with women's rights and gathers and other humanitarian organizations in the Middle East and the US, focusing on empowerment and leadership, reframing power and masculinity, and overcoming gender-based violence. Joe has also worked with different veterans organizations supporting returning and wounded veterans in their process of integration and healing. I've known Joe for about 15 years now, and the best way I can describe Joe, because this is what he's done in my life, is we've all been in those times where we're metaphorically or literally running away from a presence, an enemy, something that is from our past or even from our present that is coming after us. And before us, we see a cliff. And so it's either jump off the cliff or face our enemy. You know, don't know what to do. And then Joe Weston steps in and says, hey, you need a hand. And he's given that hand to turn around, vanquish enemy in a good way too. And you know, they kill you, but I'm just gonna dispel your power. You have no power over me, and face the cliff, and we'll jump off the cliff together and see what life brings. And so that's what Joe does, and I'm sure that you know there are many of us in the space that Joe has coached and helped along in that capacity. So welcome, Joe. Also, I want to bring up my friend Michelle Otero. Many of you know and love Michelle because she's my partner in justice and healing in our work in Colorado. Michelle is a fourth poet laureate at Albuquerque, just finishing her term. She's the author of Malinche's Daughter and the forthcoming works Bosque, Poems and Vessels, Memoir of Borders. I think that's up next year if I'm correct. Michelle is also a member of the Condo Writers Workshop, and she is a founder of Artesana Creative Consulting and coordinates the City of Albuquerque Race, History, and Healing Project. I describe Michelle as a triple earth presence. She always, and you know this, those of you who know Michelle, brings a sense of groundedness, a sense of solidity, a sense of steadiness that you count on no matter what. And with that big, huge, you know, just this big, huge energy of surrounding yourself with love. She's the best hugger in the world and has also the best laugh in the world. And so with that, you know, that alone can bring healing. And then you add on all other gifts and present. And Joe, who's going to talk a little bit about his work in Fierce Civility. Then he's going to hand it over to Michelle, who will talk about her applied work of Fierce Civility in her community, Albuquerque, and we'll go ahead and engage in a conversation. So please welcome Joe Weston.
Hello there. Hi, Kevin. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And I just want to say, I just need to acknowledge before we begin, I'm so moved by Tanea, by your work. You burst open my heart. I am so grateful and appreciative of your generosity of heart. I'm grateful for your grandmother, for the inspiration she had with you. I have to recover a little bit. I'm moved. I'm really moved, and I can't wait to get your music. So I'm going to take a breath. And I'm really appreciative to be here. I feel honored. I'm currently in Washington, D.C. I'm assuming many of you have heard of that. And I can tell you it's quite a practice of holding the skills of fierce civility in a city like this. I feel honored and grateful for being on the lands that have been inhabited and tended by the Piscataway tribes. And I'm honored to do this. I've done work in Colorado with many of the people who I think are on this session. And I have to say that my time there, I got to see what I would call truly heroes, heroines, and heroixes, people who are on the front lines to be of benefit to others, to commit to a life of service in the face of struggle and challenge. So it's an honor to be back. And in this talk about fierce civility, I'm sure each one of you would have some wise words of wisdom to say about this. So I'm grateful that I get to speak. And I'm, of course, delighted and grateful to be doing this with Kevin and with Michelle, two strong, powerful lights on this planet. I want to just say that I want to start with a quote that I think really sets up for me what we're talking about in the context. I'm going to be talking about the fierce civility method and project from an abstract sense and try to bring it into more concrete ways. So bear with me. This quote is by Eleanor Roosevelt, something she said in 1960. When there was the worry about World War III breaking out, when the world was on the brink of disaster. That's 60 years ago. She said, "We have to face the fact that either all of us are going to die together or we are going to learn to live together. And if we are to live together, we have to talk." She really set it straight that at that time that was a key. I bring that up because here we are 60 years later, and I think the question is just as relevant. We are either all going to die together or we're going to learn how to live together. And if we're going to learn to live together, we have to talk. And that is in essence what my life has been devoted to with the Fierce Civility Project and with respectful confrontation. So I'm going to, let's see, I'll just tell a little bit about my story, and then I'll go into the slides. So I was born in New York City, in Queens, and I'm very, very proud to come from Queens, New York. And I bring that up because I always say that as a New Yorker, if any of the New Yorkers are on the call, please see if you affirm that. From every day is an examination of confrontation and conflict. So as a young boy, I was already studying this idea of what is it, the fundamental question of the work that has been through my life and that has really, in a sense, motivated and driven the respectful confrontation work and the fierce civility work is, why is it, even though we know better, even though we're a relatively intelligent species, we have all the information we need at our fingertips. We can see close-up pictures of Pluto. We can see into the smallest of atoms. So technologically, we are advanced. Why is it, even though we know better, we still have arguments and fights, and on a larger scale, crime and war and hunger and racial inequality and oppression, to name just a few, and there are many more. And the question really started, I was young. As a young boy, it was expected that I would fight, and I did. And I came from a pretty volatile childhood. My father spent some time in jail when I was around 12 years old. And even in that time, I was trying to figure this out. What is the fighting about? Why do we have to stay in conflict? And I was also in New York City. It was a very diverse community that I was part of. I have to say, I don't say this often, but I don't think I really met a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant until I went to university at 16 and started understanding more about what was happening in the United States. And I have to say, just to give you a reference of that, when I first got to university, my background is in theater. I say that's an aspect. Acting is the science of human behavior. My first semester, I was part of the student theater group where I became the financial manager. I'm not really good with numbers, but I decided to do it. And the executive director, the artistic director, who I was really good friends with, who came from a small town in Massachusetts, actually said, in total seriousness, just want to let you know we're all good with our money because we have a Jew taking care of the money. And that was the first time. I mean, I've heard things like that, but that was the first, and she was serious. It wasn't a racial slur. It was just, she truly believed that, and that was her experience. So I just want to say that even coming from New York, the idea of racial diversity and cultural diversity, growing up in that and understanding more and more as I got older what the state was in the world. I was very lucky to have been able to live for 18 years in the Netherlands, where I got a chance to examine the United States from a distance and got some very clear ideas. And it was a very challenging time for me to reframe my viewpoints. And I bring that up because I had the opportunity throughout my life at that time to work with people around the world, all different kinds of people. And what I noticed in that was that the way we were able to break through our differences, even in a casual way, the way we were able to connect was when we dropped into our hearts. And I started investigating that. What I started seeing was that when we got into our hearts, healing happened, learning happened. And I realized that listening to everyone has an interesting story to tell. And in everyone's interesting story, I learned something about myself. And it was a healing for all of us. The key to that, and the first teaching I'd like to give on fierce civility, is activating your curiosity. And so that's when I started exploring what is this idea of understanding of coming from the heart. And in this process, I also started doing martial arts, as Kevin said, in terms of learning Tai Chi and understanding the force of how we use power, how we use force, and learning the softer arts, even though they're very powerful, of learning how to divert energy. And that became very key in the work that I'm doing with respectful confrontation and fierce civility. I decided to come back to the United States because I was just struggling with where things were going. And in 2005, I came back and have been part of, as Kevin said, a number of processes of working with people to find their power, to stand in their power, speak their truth, get their needs met in a way where they don't get harmed and other people don't get harmed. So I'm going to put on the slides now. And let's see, how do I do this? So here we are. As you see, this is our starting slide. Fierce Civility, Reviving the Global Heart. And I'll bring up an understanding of what that is on the slide. It's just a title slide. And just to show, because many of you people know the work that I've done with respectful confrontation, the next slide is a description of that, a method and a practice that offers ways to speak truth skillfully, deepen relationships, tap into new internal energy resources, and develop a more effective, resilient work and personal life environment based on respect, collaboration, and balance. And this is because I was just noticing that a lot of people had many gifts to share and were doing the great work, and yet finding challenges and stepping more fully in to have the impact that they wanted to have. And that this really truly was a way of how do you break through the confusion and get to deeper levels of building relationship. So that was the work with respectful confrontation. Fierce Civility takes that to more societal level or a global level, where you see in the next slide, this idea of going from personal transformation to cultural transformation. And why I bring this up in terms of what I'm talking about as the heart is how do we get to a place in this idea of fierce civility where we can actually realize that just arguing the ideas is not getting us anywhere. We put a lot of time and energy into gathering information. And I always say, if just the gathering of information were going to solve our world problems, we would have already solved our world problems. And that the real remedy is what is it going to take to get us to drop into our hearts and truly understand what that means from a fierce place. And that I want to bring in Mahatma Gandhi's quote here about what does it mean to revive the global heart. He says, nonviolence, which is the quality of the heart, cannot come by an appeal to the brain. So in essence, what this practice is, it's a heart, cultivating a heart practice, a deeper level of a resilient heart, a compassionate heart, and understanding what that means in all levels. Now, the question might be coming up, where does this come in with the global heart when we're talking about a world right now where people are just getting at each other, where we're seeing how the bully is being celebrated, how the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, how people who are oppressed are struggling to let their voice be heard. That is the question, and that is what I'd like to unravel a little bit, because the question of fierce civility is how do you bully a bully without, how do you confront a bully without becoming a bully? Because in essence, what we're seeing is that the more we fight, the more we're creating and feeding the beast of fighting, in a sense. And how can we shift that and find other strategies where we can actually be more effective with less time and effort in a way that doesn't burn us out, in a way that actually invigorates us, that leads us to thriving in deeper levels of alliances, to actually find alliances that are surprising to you. So how do you confront someone without becoming a bully? And if we have no strategies or tools for that, we end up either being aggressive or being passive. And we get stuck in those patterns. And in a sense, I use the words fierce and civility for a reason. We're not finding a way to confront the bully in a way that really brings about change. And there are old viewpoints of what fierce is in terms of vicious and in terms of violence. And yet there are also, fierce is getting a renaissance about people who are empowered, people who overcome adversity. And that there's a ferocity in it, a passion in it. And that's the fierce that I'm pulling from the word fierce. Whereas civility, if you look up the word civility in Webster's dictionary, it's kind of sad that all it says is politeness and correctness. And it talks about to be civilized is to have proper taste and etiquette. And that's not working. Being nice and polite is not working when you're trying to confront a bully. And honestly, if you think about it, the idea of who defines what civilized is, whose taste are we identifying? And unfortunately, we're still living in a country, in a world where that is still defined by colonial white Europeans. And how do we break that down and define for ourselves what civility can be in a way that really works for us now? And for me, what it does is it calls us to our highest ethics, civility, that transcends taste, that transcends customs and culture, that really just comes back to the heart of who we are as humans. So for me, the way I've combined those in Fierce Civility, if you look at the next slide, it's an unrestrained zeal and furious active determination to increase global civil engagement as a nurturer, protector, or midwife for the emergence of an inclusive, equitable, and peaceful planetary system. This impulse is motivated by our highest values, ethics, and hope, and revives our collective heart that honors and respects each individual and the planet. This is the basis of Fierce Civility. It's getting us more to a deeper level of standing in our power to speak our truth in a way that of civic and civil engagement from our and doing what we need to do to activate our highest values. In a sense, seeing that our true enemies is lack of civility, is oppression, is the thing itself. And how do we stand to that? You could say, actually, knowing that a lot of you know Kevin so dearly and his work, that this definition of Fierce Civility is a combination of pono and kuleana, living in right relationship with yourself, others, and the planet, and identifying deep in your soul your highest gifts and your highest mission, and sharing that with the world in a fierce way for the betterment of us all and for the healing of this planet. So why do I bring this all up? We're now in a time where we're all really struggling. There's so many forces that are causing us to struggle, where we're in such transition and uncertainty. I bring up a quote by William Bridges. If you look here, the quote is, "It isn't the changes that do you in, it's the transitions. Change is situational. Transition is the psychological process people go through to come to terms with a new situation. Change is external, transition is internal." So what we're seeing is that as things become more uncertain economically, with COVID, with racial injustice coming more and more to the surface, with how we're being bombarded by social media and economic challenges, it's doing a number on our nervous systems. It's causing higher levels of stress and anxiety. And those of you who have worked with Kevin and listened to John A. Powell, brilliant social activist of our time, the higher the anxiety is, the higher the diversity is, the higher the uncertainty is, the higher the anxiety is. And how are we managing that? My belief is that it's causing a challenge to the current state of the global heart. And if you look at the image here, you see two rams that are pushing against each other. The more anxiety we have, the more polarization we find ourselves in. And that's what we're finding unfolding right now, is this deeper level of polarization. And that's causing stagnation, because we're just battling ideas. We're trying to we're ramming our own ideas, and look at all the energy. If you look at my hands pushing against each other, it's a lot of time and energy with I'm right, no, I'm right. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying I'm wondering if that's the best strategy to bring about cultural transformation. So what the Fierce Civility Project offers is that if you look at its stagnation, if you look at this image, you have two halves of a circle. One is black, one is white. In a sense, there's stagnation there. They're not moving. The idea with Fierce Civility, the whole basis of it is to understand the importance of pivoting. If you have these rams ramming into each other, forward motion, what if one shifted, and just like I'm doing is turning my arms a little bit and change the dynamic? Suddenly there's room for flow and balance and new ideas. That's metaphorically, that's physically, but what if the same was with your ideas and with your words and your communication? So the idea some of you may recognize is to go from stagnation to activation. This, you have the symbol of the yin yang. And what you see here is actually the stagnation going to flow. And the idea is to recognize in each one of us an important part. Personal transformation leads to cultural transformation is starting with self. In a sense, what if I recognize that there's a little bit of me in my adversary, in a sense, or strangers, and there's a little bit of them and me, that we can always find common ground, that there's, and that what is similar is getting back to our hearts, that regardless of who you're thinking of right now, that on some level, maybe some bridges are longer to bridge, but there are a lot of short bridges with thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions or billions of people on this planet, where you can create short bridges to get from your humanity to their humanity. And if you see, the yin yang symbol says that in a little bit of the white, there's a little black, and a little bit of the black, there's a little white, and that creates flow. And that fierce civility, it's a practice that is not only about communication and strategies of mediation and reconciliation, it's also learning how to rewire your nervous system to hold higher levels of stress, to stay in those difficult conversations of self-care and empowerment. And ultimately, if you look here, I've got a couple of more slides here. What brings about resilience? When you're in that sense of flow, when you get back out of the gridlock and the stagnation of polarization, you cultivate a deep level of presence, awareness, balance, and flow. And that's pono in a sense. That's moving through the world in right relationship with yourself, with others, and the planet. And I'd like to offer just some things to think about. How do you find your power with uncertainty in these times? That even if you're finding that around you, you can't see that you can have an impact, or you're not having the impact you want, that there's a way of, don't even address the power over structure yet. Don't even address the bully. There's a lot of work that can be done from within, cultivating your own power. When you've cultivated your own power, then you start connecting with those with similar values, going from power within to power with. Creating stronger alliances. Those stronger alliances has already shifted the balance of the power over structure. With the power with of a more empowered alliance, even in places where you never thought there could be, you move to power two to help those who are disenfranchised and need support. Again, in that process, you shift the balance of the power over. So suddenly what seemed like a daunting task becomes more possible. And you can confront the bully in a way that's empowering and maybe bring about shift. So I just want to share this idea of your power within uncertainty. Where you always have power is in cultivating resilience. Where you always have power is monitoring response to stress. Where you always have power is regulating your nervous system. And most importantly, where you always have power is fostering quality connections. Particularly now in COVID time, when people feel so disempowered and disconnected, where those of us suffering from trauma or compounded stress tend to withdraw. It's an obligation. Imagine if the most revolutionary thing we can do now at this time is stay regulated, stay healthy, physically, emotionally, and mentally, and deepen our connections with those who share similar values and we love. And I love Tanea. I'm going to take this and share this. Imagine just today the number of people that you can get in touch with and say, light your fire so we know you're okay. Light your fire so we know you're okay. That's how we build deeper relationships, and that's how we empower one another and uplift one another. So one more thing I'd like to share, the key questions that can pivot within yourself, your own sense of getting out of your own internal polarization and gridlock. And I'm not saying that this is the right thing to do. These are simply 3 questions to ask. And that's a lot to unpack, but I just want to share with you to make a note. If you're interested, please get in touch with us to share. The questions that can shift your own internal polarizations, get you out of stagnation and back into presence, awareness, balance, and flow are Are you all good? And are your adversaries all bad? If that triggers you, great. Sit with it and explore it. The next question is, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? If that triggers you, great. Sit with that and explore that. And the last question is, do you want to win or do you want to see lasting transformation? So I'm offering that as just a basic guideline of what fierce civility is. There, of course. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to Michelle.
Thank you, Joe. And thank you, Tanea. Before I go into my talk, I'd like to just start us off the way that we start off our sessions with the Race History and Healing Project. And those of you who have worked with Kevin and me, or just with Kevin, this will be familiar to you. So we're just going to start to generate some heat in our hands. We'll be rubbing hands. And normally we say that you should pretend like you're in Minnesota in January, but where I'm calling from in Albuquerque, it's about 40 degrees colder than it was yesterday, so we don't need to pretend. When I count to 3, you'll put one hand on your heart, the other on your belly. Really start to get that energy going, generate some warmth in your hands. 1, 2, 3, one hand on the heart, the other on the belly. Please feel free to close your eyes if you feel comfortable. If you prefer to leave your eyes open, I invite you to just find a focal point where your eyelids can be heavy and you won't be distracted by any visual cues. Start to pay attention to where our breath is coming from without the need to manipulate the breath or to alter it in any way, just simply being in relationship with it. Paying attention and acknowledging the breath, extending our gratitude, especially at this time when so many are struggling to breathe. Let's acknowledge all the helpers who made it possible for us to be here today, anyone holding down something extra at work, at home, in any of our circles, so that we can be present here today. Now I'd like to invite us to call to mind or to bring into your heart an ancestor or elder. It can be someone who's in your lineage or a spiritual ancestor, a spiritual elder. And as you bring this person into your heart, consider what they might offer to our circle today, how their presence might enhance our time together. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge the first people of the land, whichever land you're sitting or standing upon. Thank them for their long relationship with this place and all the life within it. And we commit that our words, deeds, and actions bring no harm to them, to ourselves, or to others. Let's take one more deep inhale together. And on the next exhale, I'll invite you to drop your hands, to close your eyes if they were open. Thank you all. I wanted to give you a sense of how we start our circles for Albuquerque's Race History and Healing Project. So if anyone was around at Albuquerque in 1998 when the Juan de Oñate Monument and the La Jornada installation, which I'll share with you in a moment via PowerPoint. If anyone was around when that was being proposed in 1998, then you know through a series of town hall meetings and city council meetings and very contentious discussions, there was very little deep breathing, very little sense that we were a community, very little sense that, that this is a place that we all share and that we all share one breath. And so we now have the opportunity in Albuquerque, a place that I've called home for many years, in a state that has been my family's home for 12 generations. We now have a chance in Albuquerque to start to talk about that history in a more meaningful way. And the place that we start is first with the breath, and then we go into story. So I'd like to share with you some images. Okay, so I coordinate Albuquerque's Race History and Healing Project. In June of this year, as many communities around the country were talking about their legacies of white supremacy, whether that was Confederate monuments throughout the South or conquistador monuments throughout the Southwest, the city of Albuquerque started talking about what to do with our own monuments. So the figure that is on my screen right now is a figure of Juan de Oñate, and the other figures behind him are part of an installation called La Jornada. La Jornada means the journey. And this particular monument marks the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the Spaniards in what is now New Mexico. They came in 1598. And as I'm sharing these slides with you, I want to invite you to just think about the story that this particular monument is telling. Whose history is being celebrated? How is the history being told? And I want us to keep in mind what Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, the wonderful Nigerian writer, talks about as the danger of the single story. So as we continue looking at the slides, there are actually two monuments on the grounds of the Albuquerque Museum that mark what is called the Cuatrocentenario, the 400th anniversary. One is La Jornada, which you can see near the top of the screen. And you can see that it's quite large. It takes up a corner of the museum grounds. It's outdoors. And it's near the heart of Albuquerque, near the center of Albuquerque. The other is called Nambewaage. This is the land art installation, and this was created by a wonderful artist named Nora Naranjo Morse from Santa Clara Pueblo. When the La Jornada installation was being proposed, the compromise that the city of Albuquerque came to was that an Anglo artist, a Hispanic artist, and a Native artist would work on co-creating the monument together. So as you can see, now there are two different monuments, and that plan didn't work out so well. Nora Naranjo Morse speaks very eloquently about her experience of coming in and trying to work with the other artists to tell this story. And one of her takeaways was this idea that even though we're wearing different clothing and living in a different time, many of the issues that have been challenging for us still exist. And so what Nora ended up doing was creating a whole other installation that told the story of her people, the Pueblo people of New Mexico, who were here, who are here on their ancestral lands and have been here since long before the Spaniards arrived. I wanted to give you some other views of La Jornada, the installation. So it's not just the figure of Oñate, but it's actually the entire story of how this particular group of people came to this part of the world. So we have somebody, pushing a cart with livestock. We have women and children. There's a priest on a horse. And as you can see in the lower left-hand corner of the slide, it very clearly is a wall celebrating Spanish ancestral heritage. And this was initiated under our former mayor, Marty Chavez. So what I always like to ask in our sessions, in our Race History and Healing Project sessions, is what's the story we're telling and what's the story we want to tell? So here in New Mexico, one of the stories we really want to tell is the story of three cultures living in harmony. So this is a mural that is in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, and I'm not sure who the model is for the Anglo for the Anglo portion of the three cultures, but to me he really resembles Chuck Norris. So I kind of think of this particular mural as an Anglo, a Hispanic and an indigenous person living in harmony with Chuck Norris. So this is the story that we want to tell about ourselves in New Mexico, that we have three cultures who live in harmony, who get along well, who have found a way to make this work. And I think you can see that when that's our story, it's a very attractive one, right? Especially when there's so much strife in our country right now. We want to have a place where people get along. We want to have a place where people can live in harmony. One of the really beautiful examples from nature of these three things living together in harmony is our metaphor of the three sisters: corn, beans, and squash. And so when I think about things that really work, like these three things that actually do live in harmony together, it's these three plants. The beans restore nitrogen into the soil. They grow up the corn stalk. The squash shades the roots of the beans and the roots of the corn and protects them from insects and other predators. So they work together in harmony. That would be a beautiful thing if all three cultures and all the many other cultures that live in New Mexico did this together. But that's something that doesn't just happen. It's something that takes work, especially given our long and complicated history. So the story of Spanish conquistadors is told throughout New Mexico. So this particular statue is an alcalde, which is near Española, New Mexico. Again, a figure of Juan de Oñate, who was the first governor of New Mexico, appointed by the Spanish crown. What this particular story leaves out is that later in life, Juan de Oñate was actually convicted of war crimes by the Spanish crown. He was removed from the New World and stripped of his titles. And so he's not just a controversial figure for indigenous people in New Mexico, but actually but for people who claim Spanish or Hispanic or Mexican heritage as well. We venerate conquistadors throughout the Southwest. So the larger figure is the largest equestrian statue on the continent. So it's a figure of Juan de Oñate, and it sits right outside the El Paso airport. This particular statue was put up in the last 20 years. Lower on the screen is a mural of the Camino Real. So again, the arrival of the Spaniards, of conquistadors, of priests, of livestock coming to this part of the country, this part of the world from what was then Mexico and what is now New Mexico. We have mascots such as Coronado Elementary School, which is where my children went to elementary school. There's Oñate High School in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and West Las Vegas High School, which is further north. Their mascot are the Dons or the Dons. That's a Spanish title of nobility. The Dons and the Lady Dons. So something that we don't consider when we just look at a statue is who was here first? Who were the people who were here when these folks arrived, when the priests and the conquistadors and these explorers and settlers and people looking for a new place to live arrived? And one of those communities was the Pueblo of Acoma. So I've included here a photograph of Acoma. It's also nicknamed Sky City. So the old Pueblo sits on top of the mesa. And I have here a quote from Simon Ortiz, who's one of New Mexico's most beloved poets. "Time does have mercy, but it doesn't enumerate or wait. It moves and we move with it." So one of the places where Don Juan de Oñate conquered and left a big impression was in the Pueblo of Acoma. And this community in particular holds a lot of the history of that brutal interaction between the Pueblo people and the Spaniards. There's not enough time today to talk about that entire complicated history, but some of how it plays out when we don't take the time to talk to one another, to have meaningful dialogue, is what we see in this picture. So throughout our state, we have not only statues, but also community rituals that mark the arrival of the Spaniards. One of those was in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and it was called the Entrada, and it reenacted the re-entrance of the Spanish after the Pueblo Revolt in the 1600s. For years, there were protests against the Entrada, and after many months of dialogue led by coordinated by a dear friend of Kevin's and mine named Regis Pecos, who's a former governor of Cochiti Pueblo. The entrada was eventually retired. So when we decide that our public spaces and our public rituals can enhance our understanding and practice of fierce civility, and we're deliberate in thinking about how that can happen, beautiful things can happen. So as the entrada was retired, and here are some images of it, as the entrada was retired, a group of poets was brought together and asked to rewrite the proclamation for the city of Santa Fe. The original proclamation was written in 1710, and it honored the re-entrance of the Spaniards. As you can see here in the slides, the entrada really did reenact the arrival of the Spaniards, everything from men dressed as conquistadors on horseback, to the veneration of this particular depiction of the Virgin Mary. And as you can see from the previous slide, this was very challenging for many people, not just challenging, but hurtful and painful. And so Regis led a series of dialogues between the caballeros, who were the ones who would dress up and reenact the entrada, and the Pueblo governors. And what they came to mutually was a decision to retire the entrada. They reached out to a group of poets and asked the poets to rewrite the proclamation. So what I want to say here is that some of what we hear in our dialogues about what to do with the Oñate statue are things like, I can't apologize for my ancestors, we're erasing history, the past is the past, we're never going to please everyone. And I think that those statements are really ways that shut down dialogue. And so what we try to encourage people to do is to start from a heart-centered place. And I'll go through the questions that we ask in our sessions in a moment. So some of what we wrote into our proclamation were these notions of just being able to acknowledge the past and to tell the truth. So I'd like to read some of these excerpts from the proclamation to you. We acknowledge the past and its trauma, tragedy and sorrow. We understand its legacy in the present. We acknowledge wounds older and deeper than any on this continent. On behalf of those from the past who cannot ask forgiveness, we do so now. We recognize that there is much healing to do. We understand that genuine reconciliation is a generations-long process that is challenging and complex. It will test our resilience. For that reason, we commit ourselves to honest and compassionate engagement, no matter how hard, no matter how long. We believe in our capacity to change and to be changed. So a few years ago, Santa Fe went through this process of identifying what needed to happen so that people could heal. So one of the first things was to retire the entrada. They set up, or they made a commitment, the city government of Santa Fe and many of the parties involved, to recreate art installations and public rituals. And they also made a commitment to the truth and reconciliation process. Unfortunately, after the retirement of the entrada, there was an art installation, but the truth and reconciliation process didn't happen. And when those things don't happen, when we're not deliberate about how we carry healing forward, how we continue to be in dialogue, even when a beautiful thing like the rewriting of the proclamation and the retirement of the entrada happen, then things can get really difficult, right? Then all of those old feelings, all of the ways that we've opened ourselves up and been vulnerable and have trusted each other come into question. So it brings to mind a quote by another friend of Kevin's and mine, the Reverend Nelson Johnson, that there's nothing inevitable about time. So it's not as though our wounds will heal just because we're taking time. It actually takes work to do this and a deliberate process. So as you can see here in Santa Fe, another one of their monuments, the obelisk, which was originally intended to honor the Union soldiers from this particular part of the country who fought in the Civil War, also included very racist language against Indigenous people. So there's a placard on the obelisk, which sits in Santa Fe Plaza, that originally was engraved with the word savage And as you can see, somebody went through, scratched out savage and wrote resilient. So just a few weeks ago, some protesters went to the obelisk and toppled it. We were trying to avoid that here in Albuquerque, and to avoid letting our statue of Oñate or La Jornada or even Nambehuage become a flashpoint for protest or an area where vandalism might happen. This particular picture is the foot of the statue that used to be, in Alcalde near Española, New Mexico. This particular article appeared in the New York Times, the photos by Adria Malcolm. But one of the symbols of Oñate is that in an act of vengeance for his nephew being killed, he enslaved many people in Acoma and cut off the foot of many of the men. So this particular picture is the person who cut off the foot of the statue and still has it. So again, it's not like the history goes anywhere. We continue to need to talk about it and dialogue about it and express it. And when we create containers for that, really amazing things can happen. So our container here in Albuquerque for a Race History and Healing project, which will help us answer the question of what to do with our statues, is a 3-step process. So in every session, we come together via Zoom, which I will say is very challenging. We'd much rather be in a circle together, but we try as much as possible to recreate the feel of a circle. So our first circle is really about looking inward. We ask people to share a story about a moment when they felt affirmed in their race, ethnicity, or culture. And then we ask people to bring into the space an ancestor and what they might offer. So I usually bring in my grandmother, and I think what she would offer is what is symbolized by this rolling pin. So my grandmother was an amazing cook. She made the most incredible pie crusts. She had really good tortillas. And so to me, this rolling pin is a symbol of not only of her nurturing, but she was also really tough and didn't take stuff from anybody. So the rolling pin is also a symbol of standing up for herself. So I usually call her into the space and I have my rolling pin close by to be able to remind people of our guideposts, to be able to remind them that we're coming in a space where we really want to be almost in the spirit of sitting around a kitchen table. And then to remind myself that I'm able to trust my knowing and that I come from a lineage of strong people who are able to stand in their power. Our second circle is about values. So we ask people to get at values because that's kind of an abstract concept. We ask people to talk about a teacher that they had early in life. So not necessarily a teacher in school, but a grandparent, a parent. Like Tanea spoke so beautifully about her grandmother, and I often call on my own. And we ask people to talk about what is the gift that this person gave you and how do you embody or live into this gift? And finally, our third circle is about community. So as you can see, we don't come in and start talking about the artwork immediately. We really want to create a container where people can sit across from each other as human beings, where they're not set up to win or to lose, to have to give something so that someone can have power over them or they can have power over somebody. We invest 4 hours of conversation before we get to this final conversation in the third circle. And we ask people to talk about what impact does the monument have on you and your community? Given what we've experienced in our time together and our shared values, what do you believe should happen with the monument? And finally, if it doesn't turn out the way you'd like, what do you need and what does the community need? So I'd like to just leave us with this final quote. And this is from a very wise curandera friend of mine. So as you can see, this project has really had me awake at night. This is from my little sketchbook, and these are all thought bubbles. This is me on my couch at 3 a.m, trying to think about how to hold this project. What are the right questions to ask? How do we take care of people? How do we create a container so that people can express themselves and build trust with one another? And it's a quote from a really wonderful friend of mine who's a traditional Mexican healer, a curandera. Mujer, it took people more than 400 years to get here. You're not going to heal it in 3 months. And so one of the things I've learned through this process is that one of the ways that white supremacy asks me to show up is to be perfect. And so there's no way to have a perfect process. We can be intentional, we can ask the right kind of questions, we can hold our community in love. And we know that given that the government entity is our partner in this, there's going to be some timelines and some things that maybe wouldn't have been the way that I had designed the project if I were building it from scratch. However, what an incredible opportunity after 400 years to be able to bring people together, to sit in rooms with people who identify as Spanish and folks from Acoma Pueblo, and to hear them tell their stories about grandparents and language loss and values and customs is an incredible gift. And I can't wait to see where it goes. So thank you all very much. It's a pleasure to share these slides and to share some of the story with you.
Thank you, Michelle. I mean, so many of you know her as a master facilitator and healer. And then there's and poet, and then there's all of this. And so appreciate the work that you're doing in your home community. We know, or at least I know, that doing work at home carries a different energy, and it's hard. It's really hard. And so I want you to know that I stand with you, and we all stand with you in the work that you're doing. Can we bring Joe back on camera? And here's how we're going to go, everyone. I'm going to have 2 questions for Joe and Michelle, and then we're going to go into breakout groups for a few minutes so you all can look at each other and talk to each other and go, what was that? So I'm going to do a quick recap and also a little bit of a plug. Michelle mentioned our friend and mentor, Regis Pecos, and Regis was one of the panelists at our last summit, the Indigenous People Summit, along with Memunkwa Flying Earth, Tara Hauska, and Allison Nesswood. That recording is going to be released this week, and we will send that recording of the Indigenous Summit to you. It is amazing. And so if you want to hear from Regis himself, you can plug into that one. We will also be sending out the slide decks that Joe and Michelle sent to you folks as well. So Joe, you talked about these key questions around fierce civility. Are you all good, and are your adversaries all bad? Question 2, do you want to be right, or do you want to be effective? And question 3, do you want to win, or do you want to see lasting transformation? And Michelle, you took those principles really and turned them and kind of created this process in Albuquerque and with these folks. How many people are participating in these circles? Just give us a sense of the scope of the project. Oh, you're on mute, Michelle.
That's the quote of 2020, you're on mute. So I think we've had about, people opt in. We've had about 200 people go through at least the first circle. And then we are winding over to, once people go through 3 circles, they're eligible to be part of a community solutions table where we'll more directly engage what our recommendations are about the statute. And as of now, we have about 50 people registered for the community solutions table.
Thank you.
There's also a survey and an interview. So we've had 1,200 people fill out surveys and about 300 people sign up for interview. Thank
you. I have a question for both of you, given these questions that Joe worked at and the application of this in community in this particular time around a pretty hot issue, right? Knowing the folks that I know in Colorado and also just knowing what's going on in the country, I think there are 3 big conversations that are happening right now. One is around COVID, and I'll just go to a very specific conversation: to wear a mask or not to wear a mask. That's happening in communities all over the place, and it's certainly impacting communities in Colorado where COVID is, the numbers are up, right? It's on the increase. And so how might you use these questions of Joe's fierce civility, or the process that you're using, Michelle, for us, and you all are masters at this. And so, I mean, I'm looking at this as a mere mortal and a lay person saying, great, you're all doing this. I could never do that. How can I even start? What's my first step in this? In terms of maybe having a fierce civil conversation with not only just my next door neighbor, but like the mayor, the city council person who's not ascribing to this. Another example might be the political divide. And that's pretty self-explanatory, but the never this and the always that, whatever candidate you're looking at, and the chasm is so wide. So do I always have to be right? Are those people all bad? And so where might you find some common ground there? And the third, I think, example that you might want to bring up is around climate change. Colorado is burning up. And so for people who deny that, there might be some human some human responsibility in that. When communities are burning down, how can we do that? I mean, I'm thinking about our friends, Amanda's here and Jen is here, so passionate because their communities are literally, Sarah Lisa's here, their communities are literally burning down as we speak in Grant County. So how do you do that using fierce civility and respectful confrontation? I'm going to hand this over to either of you to kind of address that meta question of what is it that we as mere mortals and lay people can do to take those first steps in putting this to practice?
You want to go, Joe?
After I could go, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'll just say quickly, I think it starts with the heart. So I even think about okay, I guess I'm going. So I have 4 brothers, and probably 4 of the 5 of us are pretty politically aligned, like on the left end of the spectrum. I'm probably farthest left. And I have one brother who's very conservative, and that felt like a real divide for, just a way where I didn't even know how to access him for many years. And then several years ago, I just made a decision that it's probably not going to be comfortable for a long time to just hang out with my brother, to talk to him, to ask him about his life. And I'm just going to sit in the discomfort and just try to get to know him again, in a way that I haven't since we were kids. And so now I call him. If I'm in California, which I haven't been for a while because of COVID, I'll reach out and visit, just ask him about his work, his family, what he's reading, music. And it's, as John Powell talks about, it's created a bridge where every now and then we might talk about issues on which we differ, about climate change or about responses to COVID or about the presidential election. And so I guess my approach is always that, and with this process in particular, it had to start from a heart place. It had to start from a place of empathy, so that the container was strong enough to hold that harder conversation about the artwork.
Thanks, Michelle. Joe?
Yeah, I mean, that is the key of it. But I just expand on what it means to be in the heart. There's empathy, there's compassion, there's also common ground. There's also appealing to someone's highest values. There's appealing to basic human needs. I always say that the language of power is the language of feelings and needs. And the language that disempowers us and keeps us in these the polarization and the back and forth without any solutions is when we're just exchanging ideas. We don't need the ideas anymore. We need solutions. The ideas are not leading to solutions, because the only way that solutions can come is if, first of all, you have the courage to speak your truth, which means you're only speaking your side of the story. There's a lot of respect in that. There's curiosity in that, to be able to say, and there's a humbleness of, I can't possibly know it all. To be able to say, all I can do is share my side of the story, and then at the same time create the environment for someone to feel safe enough to share their side of the story. And if they feel safe to share it truly from their heart, then you're going to get new information. And that information isn't necessarily going to be data. That information is going to be a feeling. It's going to be a need. And from there, if you can express your need and have them truly express their need, then that's the creative process where new solutions can emerge.
So yeah, I want to dive into this a little bit further, because Joe, you talk about this notion of truth and facts, right? And so there's certain facts around, let's say COVID, like it's airborne, et cetera. Those are the facts. And if somebody isn't wearing their mask, I wrote down this notion of urgency and time. And going back to Michelle, the quote that the curandera shared, it took 400 years to get here, Muyar. We ain't gonna do this in 3 months. At the same time, it's like, wear your dang mask. Wear your mask, right? What can I say this like there's a truth there, and I don't want to turn to wonder about this. Just wear your dang mask, right? Or your nephew who won't vote. It's like, will you just vote? And we don't have time to talk. Just get out there and vote. And so that's where I'm feeling the kind of this notion of come from your heart and give it the time and all of this stuff. And it's like, we've got stuff to do right now. And so what is that? How do you live in that tension?
So can I offer something, a way to approach that, just like the way to actually approach it? Because this came up in a training and someone asked, how do I confront someone? We have a little league team and we're meeting and everyone has to wear a mask and there's one guy who's not wearing a mask and he's adamant about it. And I don't feel like I'm not revealing any confidentiality. We're not gossiping. I'm using this just as a general example. I just want to preface that. And this guy who isn't wearing the mask, when people would say, put your mask on, he would come with facts. Yeah, but this. And so it would get stuck in the facts and the data. And what I suggested was to approach it in this way. Listen, can we have a moment and stand, just talk for a moment? And I just want you to know that this is something that's really coming from my heart. I just want to check in with you and just let you know that we have rules here. You know the rules, and what I'm noticing, my truth, is you're not wearing a mask. Let me tell you the effect it's having on us. It's making us all really anxious. And we're really concerned. And you must know this. We don't get a chance to get outside and be with people much. Our kids don't get a chance to play. It would be so nice if we didn't have to have this extra anxiety. So what we need is to just feel like we can have some fun and just be with each other. What do you think about that? Again, the language of power is the language of feelings and needs. It cuts through all of the data and it appeals to their heart. You mentioned what you're noticing, you speak to the effect it's having, and then you get to the needs, because there's always common ground there.
Thank you, Joe. So it's that need to also, as your question too, to be right or to be effective, right? I don't need to pound in the facts, but I want to be effective. I want you to wear your mask. So what are the ways in which you're going from here to there, right? And then he's pushing on the facts. And
that's the pivot. And I don't need to win, right? I don't need to win this. I just want to have fun.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. Michelle, anything to add to that?
I think that it's that vulnerability piece, right? And I think that's where, and I've seen it modeled in really beautiful ways in some of these circles. And I think where one place, I think any of us can go to YouTube and just Google Costco employee, woman who won't wear a mask. And it's like a masterclass in respectful confrontation. She's just so patient and reminds the patron of the rules and why it's important to wear a mask, and then just keeps asking, like, what do you need? What do you need? And talking about the impact of her not wearing a mask on the business. I'll say that I think where I get tripped up sometimes, especially when I'm triggered, which has happened in a couple of sessions, is feeling like it's hard for me to access my vulnerability if I feel a threat is coming. So it's on Zoom, the threat is different. We're not talking about masks and no masks. What we're talking about is maybe aggression or the way somebody might be showing up in a circle. And it's why we've built into our practice on our 10-person facilitation team that we, when possible, we always prioritize co-facilitation so that there are two of us. So that if I'm triggered, if somebody has said something that's really hurtful, or I need a moment to catch my breath, my co-facilitator can come in, and vice versa. So I guess it's like, who's doing the confronting and who is the one who's stepping in. It's the person who feels equipped and capable of doing it in that moment. So this process has also been a wonderful lesson in not having to do everything and being able to rely on the team and the community.
Beautiful, Michelle. I think this in part helps. Morgan had a question for you, Michelle, so I'm just going to read this out. I so appreciate your attention given to process rather than product. In many communities, not all people have equitable access to being able to participate in these deeply important processes. Specifically, it can be more difficult for those who may have experienced the most harm and for whom this experience can be traumatic. How do you create space through an equitable lens, acknowledging that not everyone is coming from the same levels of power and privileges? So you talked about this notion of having a partner, which you and I do all the time, right? And so that, I think that's one piece for Morgan. Any other thoughts that both you and Joe can offer up?
I think that's why spaciousness, like having spaciousness within the process and time, are so important. It's that quote from my friend Erika, like, it took us 400 years to get here. We're not going to fix it in 3 months. So I describe my coming into this process as literally like the train is leaving the station and I am jumping on board. And at first my leg was hanging off, and then I was able to get in and kind of slow it down. It's still a coal-fired train, so it's like, don't put as much coal in. I don't want to go that fast. And once I was able to get in there and get in the engine room, I was able to kind of like put some brakes on and work in that space between my team and the city, and just reminding folks who are used to doing processes very differently, like this large bureaucracy and this machine that is the city of Albuquerque or any city government, that that empathy takes time, that it takes time to create a container where people can experience empathy and where they can experience compassion. So that said, this particular process is still faster than I would like it to be. So maybe we've stretched it from 3 months to about 5 months. I tried to stretch it out as long as I can. And one of the biggest issues that's come up is regular access, right? Like, how does everyone who wants to participate have Wi-Fi access? Can we do some phone sessions, many phone sessions? How are people able to engage in this? The people who are most impacted by this, or impacted very specifically, are Pueblo people. And those are some of the communities that are experiencing some of the highest rates of COVID. And so some of what we've done in the process is we've tried to stretch it out as much as we can, but we've also looked at it almost as like taking the long view, like, what are we embedding in the city of Albuquerque that can be used over generations, so that it's not just about the statue, it's not just about this time, but really, can we put something in place so 20 years from now, we're not having these exact same conversations about a whole other set of artwork or a park or the name of a school.
That's what we did in New Orleans 5 years ago when there was the whole talk around the dismantling of 4 Confederate monuments. Did a very similar piece around that. And when people went through that process, you know, at the end of the day, they said, you know, we have recommendations around the monuments, and yet what we want to do is make sure that this process that we did, where community folks can talk to each other, we've got potholes, we've got schools to fix, we've got crime, we've got you know, issues around climate change and flooding and hurricanes and all of that. How can we continue this? And that's what they've been doing over the past 5 years. And so that notion of seeing at it over time, there's an issue right now that's before us, and that these practices last, of sphere civility, they last. I'm wanting to go into smaller groups so you can drop into these folks and have conversations. So Joe, you know, we're really excited, and we know you just launched the website. So if Todd, you can toss the Civility website. What's next for you, or how can we stay engaged? Yeah, what's the best way to continue this journey if we want to?
Yeah, thank you. So if you check the Civility Project website, we're doing a lot of different projects. We're doing heart walks, which is creating walks in the shape of taking a map of the city, finding a route that's in the shape of a heart and walking that as a meditation of peace, pro-peace. It's a way of engaging with different people. You can find out about that. The plan is to create the Sphere Civility Ambassadorship Program training, to train people, to Kevin, who I want to get involved with that, to train people to go back into their communities and to create these healing circles, kind of an idea to have these conversations. And with respectful confrontation, we're always doing trainings to learn the skills of the communication part of this.
And you're doing RC, respectful confrontation, virtually. So so you all who have taken respectful confrontation, imagine Joe doing it by Zoom. Michelle just did one a little while ago virtually, and so it works, yeah.
We're also, just if you don't mind, every Wednesday evening now, we're offering a stress reduction meetup. If you're feeling that you need a little support during the elections, It's 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. It's contribution based to help you learn a little neuroscience and regulate your nervous system. So you can find that on our website as well.
Thank you. Keep in mind the heart walks, you can create them in your own community. I remember this was years ago when I first met Joe, and you know, I still say yes to whatever Joe says, but it was like, let's do a heart walk in San Francisco. It's like, yes, let's do a heart walk in San Francisco. And Joe picked like the hilliest hills to go up and down. And I was just like, oh my goodness. And so, you know, I'm just imagining whatever heart walk you're doing, like he just, the first heart walk in San Francisco was just, okay, Joe, we're gonna do this, right?
Change that.
Any other way we can like go around? No. So so they are good, rigorous and vigorous. They speak to the mind, the body, and the heart and the body, because you get a good workout as well. Thank you all. I just want to, if you can do a 30 seconds, because I want to give Dana a minute before so she can get her stuff together. We're going to put people in breakouts. So 30 seconds. Michelle, any closing thoughts, comments, blessings to the groups, and then to Joe.
I hate it. It's anyone can do this. Yeah, so it doesn't, and you just can start where you are. So it doesn't have to be a citywide project. It doesn't have to be, I think, you know, oh my gosh, I'm not remembering his name, John. John talks about like, don't start with the devil, right? So you don't have to start with the devil, start where you are and practice your civility in your own home, in your relationships. And as you build that muscle, it becomes more natural to do it in these other bigger spheres. So I think just start where you are in your sphere of influence.
Yeah, I would say that I was going to say almost the same thing, is that, you know, oftentimes we get stuck in this idea of loved ones and adversary, and that we need to add stranger, that there's 7 billion or more strangers that you can be creating alliances with, that you don't even need to deal with unless you direct, you know, with the adversary. Build those relationships, reach out to people that are different, find alliances in surprising places, and in a sense, within that, just know that you have an enormous amount of power and gifts and resources within yourself, and that every small change is going to create a larger change.
Thank you so much. If you can just throw, as you are, throw some love and appreciation to Michelle and to Joe in the chat box. Thank you very much.